Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is a very exciting moment for me, and you'll see why in a few minutes. My name is DeForest B. Soaries Jr. My friends call me Buster. I am the founder and president, CEO of a company based in New Jersey called Corporate Community Connections. I am the retired pastor of the First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens in Somerset, New Jersey, and I'm thrilled to not only be with, but introduce you to a friend of mine that I've known for some years now, a man whose vision is, in my mind, unprecedented, and a man who is committed to the economic empowerment and inclusion of all people, Mr. Michael Bourque, CEO of a marvelous company called Kavi. Michael, thanks for spending this time with me and giving me time to spend with you today. Welcome to this final day of Black History Month webinar.
Thank you very much, Buster. It's super exciting to be here today. I can't think of a better way to kind of cap off a month in celebration of Black history than to spend a little bit of time talking about the partnership that our two groups have kind of put together here, really aimed at helping Black real estate investors kind of begin their journey and build wealth through real estate. So super excited to be here today. It's been great to reconnect with you as well through this process, and thrilled to be here.
Well, Michael, you mentioned reconnecting, and of course we met some years ago at a company based in Florida, and at that time I was intrigued by the fact that you were living a very prosperous life, prosperous in terms of what you were doing for people, based in the Virgin Islands. And the next thing I looked up, and you were moving your whole family from what many people would consider paradise all the way to the opposite end of the country to take on a job at a company that I had never heard of. Well, tell us more about that. I want people to know your decision-making process and your story, and then I want to share with them the little something that happened the first time we met.
No, sure, and a great question, maybe illogical to some. I think, we spent 4 years living in the Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands. It was in the island of St. Croix, and it was a wonderful experience, and really had a terrific time, both from a personal level and also just from a professional growth perspective, kind of working together at Aquin. And unfortunately, in 2017, there were two kind of Category 5 hurricanes that kind of hit that part of the world, and most notably Puerto Rico and Hurricane Maria, but the Virgin Islands also suffered. And so around that time, we were trying to figure out what to do. The island was hit pretty hard, and so my wife and boys went back to the States while we kind of the island could settle. And through that process, really just started thinking about maybe what would be next, and really wanted to get my family into a more stable learning environment in particular. And so I had a chance to meet Matt Humphrey, who was one of the co-founders of Kavi, formerly known as Lending Home, back in 2015, just through some different conversations, and reconnected with him then, and so had the opportunity to move out to the West Coast. I'm a Northeast guy, so was really excited to kind of see what the West Coast was all about. And really, more than that though, it was the opportunity to get a little bit closer to tech. My background, I'd spent 15 years at GE and GE Capital in a variety of different finance leadership roles across both industrial manufacturing and financial services. And while there's certainly a lot of technology in those businesses, not in kind of the tech world as you think about it today. And so I thought it would be a great chance to go to a small company, have a big impact, as well as just learn really what kind of the tech industry is all about. And so that really kind of drove the move, and was thrilled by the decision, and really, really excited with how things have played out.
So now you talked about being at GE for 15 years, and I'm sure some of my friends are looking and asking themselves, well, wait a minute, you were at GE for 15 years, then you were at another company where I met you, now you're at another company. I'm sure they're wondering the same thing I was wondering the first time we met. Folks, the first time I was in a meeting with Michael Bourque, he looked like an intern, but he talked like an old executive. And so as it became my turn to ask this high finance guy a question, my first question to Michael, do you remember my first question to you?
I think you said it, excuse me, and don't take this the wrong way, but how old are you?
That's exactly right. I couldn't figure out how this young, who I thought was an intern, this young person could be talking about interest rate swaps and cash flow projections and balance sheets. It just didn't make sense to me. And you still have a youthful look, albeit with all of the experience that you've had in corporate America. Um, you went to a relatively young company. You know, I retired from a church that was founded in 1937, and you left a good job to go to a company that some could be considered a startup, but the company's been very successful. Talk about why Kavi, formerly Lending Home, has been able to be so successful in such a short period of time.
Yeah, no, you're right, Buster. It was very much a startup. I think the company had just raised its Series D at the time, and so had cash, which for me was important. You know, picking up and moving your family across the country, taking a lot of risk for an unproven company. That was probably the earliest stage type company I'd go for. I think what is unique about Kavi is really the mission of the company is to help people live better through real estate. And so in 2013, when the company was founded, it was really set out trying to help kind of reimagine the residential mortgage process, and through kind of the use of its technology and its processes, quickly realized there was maybe an even bigger, more attractive opportunity, and that was to really help real estate investors revitalize the $25 trillion of aged housing stock across the country. And so the focus of the company really shifted to thinking about kind of aged homes and the small businesses and the entrepreneurs that really are serving to try to revitalize those homes, you know, make investments for themselves, you know, and ultimately live better through real estate.
So, Michael, like the church that I served, which is in central Jersey, 1 mile south of Johnson & Johnson's corporate headquarters, in a relative area of financial prosperity, but in a neighborhood that had basically missed all of the economic prosperity of the region. The poorest residents, the oldest housing stock. And we looked out at that neighborhood and said, either one of two things are going to happen. Either gentrification is going to take place and people are going to buy these old houses, fix them up so that the people here can't afford them, or the people here are going to have opportunity to do it themselves. Yeah. Kavi seems to be uniquely positioned to help the second option and to help people avoid the first. You know, as we travel around the country, my work involves teaching people to teach people about finances, to avoid debt, to avoid delinquencies, avoid deficits. And one of the ways to increase income is through real estate. Kavi seems to be uniquely positioned despite the fact that many neighborhoods have been overlooked. We've been redlined by banks. We have low interest. We have low credit scores among many of our residents. But Kavi seems to have this formula, this approach, and I think, based on having heard you, it's based on your technology. But I'd like to hear your view as to why you think Kavi is the right partner for us as we focus, not exclusively, but we focus heavily on what we call underserved communities.
Yeah, no, great question, and I think we are well positioned to support you in kind of your broader community in those efforts. You know, Kavi's not a traditional lender. We're not one with the old school paper-based processes that you might expect, and kind of that technology approach funnels through everything from kind of how a potential customer interacts with us, whether they're a first timer or somebody that's done 100 transactions with us. They get a very different experience, all based on technology. But really what is different is kind of how we look at success. And so one of the key drivers that we think about is ultimately, how do we make sure that this real estate investor is set up for success in their project? And so we've done 38,000 transactions over 7 years, and we have all of that information running through kind of AI and machine learning models that really help drive kind of predictive outcomes and say, look, you might be doing too much or too little in this home, or this isn't going to work, this isn't going to pencil out, and really help our customers be kind of almost optimized on the way in. So there's less surprises, things like that. A traditional lender, they're not going to care whether you pay off the loan and pay it back that way, or they have to take the home and get their economics that way. We're very different, right? We want our customer to find success, be able to complete that project, exit that project if that's what they want to do, and then work on their next one with us. And I think a really interesting data point that speaks to how we've been able to be different than other folks is, over the last 12 months in the industry, or I guess through 2021, about 73% of fix and flip transactions in the country made money. And so, pretty good, 3/4 maybe. If you're a Kavi customer, that number is between 93 or 95%. And so you've got almost 20 percentage point better likelihood of being successful in that real estate investment by partnering with us. And so as we think about making decisions, we're not just thinking about, okay, what's somebody's FICO score? Yes, that is an input in the process, but we go beyond that to say, what is the kind of renovation potential of that home? What is the value creation potential of that home? What is the market that it's in? And we, again, run all of our analytics across all of those different dimensions to ultimately make that decision. And for somebody who's a first timer, we have people, that are there to, I don't want to say hold your hand, because I think people are sophisticated and know what they're getting into, but to walk you through the process, help you know what to expect, and be there, as things come up and you have questions, really, again, in service of trying to help make sure you're going to get a successful outcome by partnering with Kavi.
Well, what I found interesting, Michael, is that in meeting with your team to prepare for our working together, in reading all of your material, what has really struck me is that starting with you, but cascading out to your entire organization, no one seems to be afraid to address the wealth gap that exists in Black America. No one seems to be shying away from the fact that our goal, I've set a goal of finding 250 people that want to invest in 1 to 4 family houses in their neighborhoods and help them learn how to do it, give them mentoring, take them through preparatory courses. But at the end of the day, they need access to capital. And no one on your team has shied away from this idea that it is not only morally correct, but it's good for business to go after a segment of the market that has been either overlooked or has been left out. Can you just give us, add a little color to why are you people like this? Why do you care about the fact that, for instance, in my state, median income for a white family is $350,000. Median net worth, rather, is $350,000. Median net worth for a Black family is $6,200. And what I found in you and your team is that you actually care about that, and you're willing to help us access capital to use real estate investing to help close the gap.
Yeah, look, I think it goes back to, we're a mission-driven company in that we really are trying to aim to help people live better through real estate. And, one of the sad truths of kind of the real estate industry in this country is there's just been a history of institutional discrimination against, Black and minority Americans, almost going back a century, that, to the period right after World War II, where you saw the government make significant investments in real estate generally, but excluding Black Americans from being able to participate in what was one of the biggest eras of wealth creation, over the course of 20 and 30 years. And so whether it's, redlining policies or practices from HUD and things like that, you ended up having, a generation or multiple generations of Black Americans that were left out. And so led to what you just described in terms of the wealth disparity, in New Jersey. And so, for us, the opportunity here really is, helping people, identify opportunities in their local environments, say, look, I think this is an attractive investment. Be a partner for them, help them understand how to make that exercise successful, and then be there, through that process to hopefully help them find success and then help them do it again. And so, what we've learned over the years, at least, in real estate generally, is it's been kind of the one industry where you can have significant wealth creation. You don't need advanced degrees. You just need a little bit of education, capital, and some sweat equity, willing to really go for it. And then once that wealth is created, it's actually one of the stickiest sources of of wealth that in terms of transferring from generation to generation. And so look, there's a lot of challenges in this country today, but I think we're really excited about the ability we have to be able to help create a whole new generation of entrepreneurs, really trying to tackle these opportunities in their local communities.
Well, every year before COVID, we would have events around the country in various cities, sometimes in churches, sometimes in schools. And at one of our events about 4 years ago, we featured a group of children between ages, I think it was 8 and 14. And they had been on the Steve Harvey show, and they became famous for flipping houses in Washington, D.C. These children, with the help of their parents, were buying houses. They were fixing up the houses themselves, and then they were selling the houses. And these children were just fascinating. And part of what we're going to share with people who join our Real Estate Investor Network is the video where those children talk about how they do it. How hard is this work? You've worked now with 38,000 investments. How hard is it for people to get into this and to really be successful at it?
Well, look, it's not something to take lightly, right? You need to be committed. You need to do your homework. You need to spend as much time as you can kind of getting educated both on the process you should follow and the typical pitfalls people run into. I think what we find is one of the biggest factors where people run into trouble is it just takes longer than they might imagine, for them to complete the project. And that means more, taxes, insurance, interest costs, things like that get factored into it, and it starts eating away at the return. And so really it's about making sure folks kind of can bite off something that they can handle, at least for their first couple transactions. And as they build up that experience, try to tackle, maybe more complicated things. What we found is, for folks getting started, somebody might have some experience in finance, somebody might have some experience as, in a certain trade. Oftentimes we see people kind of go and, through their, search their network and almost, partner up with a handful of different folks who have different skill sets that can be applicable, in a project. And so if you look at a simple renovation might be, floors, kitchen, a bathroom, and some landscaping. And so if you think about what goes into that, it's maybe a lot of painting, changing the floors, and so people finding, folks within their network they have a relationship with, there's trust there that they can rely on. I think that goes a long way in terms of, kind of taking some of the fear out of, really what you might run into. And so ultimately, I think it's really just about, being responsible and assessing the investment, but then, going for it. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think, Mike, to your point, Michael, there are people whose roles differ. We have, for instance, in our network, a young man who's done 1,000 houses in New Jersey, 1,000 houses, 100 we're all in one municipality, and he's agreed to mentor people that would like to get into the business. We have other people who invest in his company. They don't want to find the house, they don't want to find the plumber, they don't want to hire a realtor, but they want to invest in the business. And so we invest in his company. He does the work, we provide the capital. And I think there are ways that people can participate if they are part of a network, which is one of the reasons we've decided to form a network, because we have realtors, we have contractors, we have investors and others who would like to work together. But quite frankly, it didn't make sense to take this step, although I've had this on my mind in light of the work that I've done personally and in light of what my church did. I've had it on my mind, but unless you can access the capital that you need to do the investing and to do the renovations, it doesn't make sense to assemble people just to talk. And that's why the Kavi relationship is really, it's groundbreaking and it's a game changer, because you describe Kavi as a technology company that happens to be in finance. I mean, where is the technology taking Kavi? Where might you be 5 years from now?
Yeah, it's a good question. For us, really, it's thinking about how can we help real estate investors, not just kind of find success through that kind of maybe lending and capital decision, but across all of the steps of the life cycle they go through. And so for us, we think about it really across 4 dimensions. It's helping them identify the property, acquire that property, renovate it, and then ultimately monetize it, whether it's through a sale or becoming a landlord themselves. And so, there's, you spend a little bit of time, doing your own kind of research. If you're fancy yourself a real estate investor, there's all sorts of different software out there that you can sign up for and pay, to help identify properties. And, candidly, some of it is okay. But nobody really has kind of access to the data that we have. And so one thing that we're thinking through is how do we bring, the information that we have and put the power of that information into the hands of potential real estate investors far sooner in the process to help them, almost guide their journey well before they think about even submitting a loan application for us. And so putting the power of that information in their hands, as you think about acquiring a property, we work with, again, people who are first-time investors, but also people who are really pros. They're running small businesses. They're doing this full time. When talking about, potential new products with one customer, one of our product teams, the customer said to them, it would be great if you could just help me generate offers and then, help me kind of keep track of things, because that day, that one real estate investor happened to have 10 offers in flight. And so, you've bought and sold real estate, I'm sure, purchase and sale contracts, they're a pain in the neck, they're overly detailed. Imagine having 10 in flight in one day. You got negotiations going back and forth. And so, that's maybe not rocket science from a technical perspective, but again, bringing a tool to real estate investor customers that could help simplify their day-to-day lives. And then, all the way through, whether it's getting access to discounts for materials, to thinking about ways to either help them exit their properties faster or move seamlessly into maybe a longer term rental product that allows them to be a landlord over time. There's so many ways that I think we can support our customers as they, again, are, themselves are on their own journey to kind of build their own, their own businesses, candidly. And so that's what we're really excited about over the next, 3 to 5 years is building out that much bigger vision.
Yeah, well, I'm excited about where Kavi is going. I'm excited about how we can make it available to people who otherwise might miss out on the opportunity. A lot of what happens in America is not blatant or explicit discrimination or racism. We just don't know each other. We live in a diverse country, but we live in our own pockets. And to the extent that we can build bridges between resources and need, we can really make an impact on some of the horrible conditions that have persisted through generations. And that's why, I participated in a number of Black History Month celebrations, as I have every year in my adult life. But I'd like to focus not only on celebrating the past, but also on carving strategies for the future. And the future in this regard really bodes well for people who will do this. Now, this is not for everybody.
Yeah.
I know there's certain aspects of real estate investing I've stayed away from because I don't have the stomach for it. I don't have the time for it. I don't have the patience for it. But for those who are investing and they need access to capital, as I did, we had a bank give one of our nonprofits 4 houses as a donation, but we couldn't borrow the money from anywhere to fix up the houses. And so we had to become creative and resourceful to raise the money. Let's talk more concretely about this credit issue, because I know you want to know from me. You asked me just a few days ago, what are some of the key barriers that prevent African Americans from accessing capital? One of the key barriers is credit scores. And I don't want to go into a descriptive analysis of why we are disproportionately low in credit scores, but talk about how you approach credit scores, assuming that my team will help people improve their credit scores to get up to a certain level that make them less risky. Where do you start in terms of approaching people with credit scores of varying levels?
Yeah, no, great question. So we have a floor. We won't lend to someone with a FICO score below 600, but we're not a traditional lender in that, it's a hard line, and that's the only thing we look at. Again, we look at who the individual is or who the kind of the key folks within that entity, if they're they're operating in an NDR, but also what that project is, how complex it is, how simple it is, and what the value creation potential in that home may be. And if you think about what ultimately the decision that we're making is, do we believe that this individual or this group of individuals can execute on a renovation scope that they'll outline for us at the beginning of the project, and that that's really it, because we'll run all the math kind of in the analytics behind the scenes to say if they do complete that scope as estimated on the timeline that they indicate, that we believe that home will be worth Y. And so that really is ultimately the decision. And so yes, credit score and who the individual is matters, but ultimately it's about, do we believe they'll be able to execute that scope, and do we believe the value will be there? And so that's really how we think about the decision. And again, it's about making sure that that individual is set up for success. One interesting point, and one thing I think that makes us a little bit different from some of the other maybe tech-enabled real estate companies out there that use a lot of data and things like that, is that we're not out there buying houses through a computer at some office park in Seattle. We've got customers that are in their local markets. They know their neighborhoods, they know their communities, they have an idea, they see potential, and they're willing to put their own money at risk first. And they come to us with that idea and say, look, here's what I'd like to do. What does the data tell me? And so sometimes there's back and forth and some discussion about what makes the most sense. But ultimately, I think it's the combination of that local intelligence, from that potential real estate investor, with again the data from the 38,000 transactions that we've done. The marriage of those two inputs really is what I think kind of sets these projects up for success. So much so that in November I was at a conference in Arizona and happened to meet a real estate investor. He's a Black American based outside Detroit, and he said, it's gotten to a point now where I quit my job as an engineer. I'm doing real estate investing full time. And I've learned over the last couple of years, when your team says this isn't going to work, not to do it. I just listen to them now. I don't bother trying to fight. I don't bother trying to think about alternate ways. I'm not emotional about it, and it's really helped. It's really helped him be successful. And so you love to see that, because it really is a partnership. It's about a relationship and helping somebody succeed, and then hopefully coming back and doing it again because they've enjoyed that process. They've been able to make a little bit of money through it, and importantly, revitalize an aged home in the process.
Well, Michael, I think that last answer really summarized a description of this business for anyone who's considering either going into it or expanding their business. Now, we call this a fireside chat. It's starting to feel more like an interview, so don't let me, I can ask you questions for the next 2 weeks. Don't let me dominate the questions. This is in many ways the celebration of a launch of a relationship, and the relationship involves two parties. Your organization and my organization together, I think, will help many more people than we would have apart. And so I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, no, wonderful. And maybe with that segue, I'd love to hear, kind of more about, just your background and, why creating kind of corporate community connections and the D-free financial movement was so important to you.
Well, I've been blessed in my life, in my career, and all of my successes that people can read about in my bio are attributable to two things. One, having had a family that was my foundation in terms of my values and my vision. But then beyond that, having relationships, people who were in strategic places that could either recommend me or promote me in the accomplishment of things that I've accomplished. We met because some people who knew me and respected me recommended me to the board of a corporation that I otherwise would have never been on. And what I find is that the greatest value I can offer as an individual is to take the relationship that I've been blessed to have and extend them beyond myself. I mean, how many houses can I buy? How much money can I make? How many appointments can I receive? And so corporate community connections was my way of institutionalizing the concept of, well, it's not what you know, but who you know. And to take all of the who I knows and connect them to communities and leaders and entrepreneurs who could benefit from the very same contacts and resources that I have. And that's where corporate community connections came from. It's taking corporate connections and in some instances government connections and building bridges with communities and community groups for the benefit of those who could use a leg up and use access to resources. Within the context of that, D3 came out of my personal experience. When I was in my 20s, I was driving nice cars, wearing nice clothes, eating in nice restaurants, but I was broke. I was using credit cards to finance lifestyle. I was taking calls from bill collectors, and I lived that way for over a dozen years. And my grandmother had 6 children. She had a husband who was an invalid. She was a seamstress, no education. But when she died at 81 years old, she left me a house that had no mortgage. In fact, she left 3 houses, one to my aunt, one to my uncle, and one to me. And at her grave, I said, you know what, this is embarrassing. If my Black grandmother with no credit and no civil rights and no political power could be a seamstress and leave 3 pieces of real estate paid for, and if I died today, all I'd have is credit card bills, I decided to change my life. And D3 has become a curriculum that basically emerged out of what I did to go from living above my means, paying bills late, using credit to support a lifestyle, to now being on boards of corporations, having assets sufficient to retire. And so I turned it into a curriculum. We've got a book, a workbook. We train trainers around the country. And unfortunately, we've been so focused on just helping people with debt and financial management. We have not been focused enough in 17 years on helping people grow their income. Since I've grown my income, starting with my grandmother's house through real estate, I decided that this should be a priority, because if it worked for me, it can work for anybody. So that's where D3 came from. The D stands for, well, it's bad deeds and good deeds. The bad deeds are debt. And when I talk about debt, obviously it's not a contradiction. I'm talking about debt to support a lifestyle you otherwise could not afford. Kavi gives us good debt, debt that we can use to create wealth that's sustainable. So it's debt, delinquencies, and deficits. The good deeds are deeds, dividends, and deposits. So that's my story.
Well, that's great, and it's incredible, and that mission is, I think, so important. Candidly, for probably all young folks today, but especially those in minority communities. And reflecting back on my own, growth as an individual. There was one Christmas I was in, I don't know, my mid to late 20s, and had to go open a new credit card so I could, get enough Christmas gifts and things like that. And I kind of had this aha moment where it was like, wait, you've got a great job, got a great family, like what the hell's going on here? Kind of get your stuff together, and really was one of those moments that I'm grateful for, because it really allowed me to get my act in order. But a lot of people don't have that, or don't have the means to be able to make the course correction along the way that I did. And so I just think it's wonderful, what you've been able to do over so many years, and excited to be part of this next step in the journey. One of the things, we've talked about here is the access to capital for minority real estate investors. And I know you've done a lot, trying to be creative in the absence of maybe good solutions, for kind of minority and underserved real estate communities. I'd love to hear kind of more about some of those experiences and some of the challenges that you've run into that you think are still prevalent today.
Sure. Well, one challenge we have is that there's a lot of real estate in urban communities that's what we would call tied up or locked up. We had a failed condominium development right across the street from the church. It was controlled by drug dealers, and it was primarily a rental community to tenants living on Section 8, when in fact it was supposed to have been a development to attract middle income people to the neighborhood. But the developer went bankrupt, the bank went out of business, and so the federal government owned these houses right across the street from the church. When we tried to get control of those houses, to fix them up, to sell them to first-time home buyers, the government said, well, it's a part of a $10 billion portfolio. You've got to buy the whole portfolio. And we were like, we're not trying to buy real estate from Maine to Florida. We just want to fix up our neighborhood. So
Yeah.
it took 2 years to wrestle politically and financially to wrestle that property out of that multi-billion-dollar portfolio just for the purpose of fixing up our neighborhood. And you know from the work you've done, there are investors who have control of properties all across the country, and those investors can say yes or no to the people who'd like to buy them and fix them up. That's a challenge. It was a challenge then. It's a challenge now. And sometimes you have to use political muscle and political influence just to free up the house that's boarded up on your block down the street. The other challenge we had, as I mentioned before, was having control of individual houses and then not having access to the capital that we needed to repair and sell the houses to the people in the neighborhood. What we had to do in one instance was to form an LLC and invite private investors to invest the money we needed to do the repairs, but we were paying 15% interest on that money because that was the way to make it attractive to investors.
Yeah.
We've had banks that would not come to the neighborhood at all because of the crime rate and because of the poverty rate. And so each individual project has its own barriers, and you need persistence, you need patience, and sometimes you need political support to just to do one house or especially to do one block. But we prevailed in most instances. The project that we had the most trouble with was when we were doing the pre-foreclosure purchases and we were borrowing money from a traditional bank to do those purchases. And the idea was to help people keep the house, get back on their feet and buy the house back. But we didn't have sufficient resources to support the families in other ways. And so that project probably cost us $500,000 that we could not repay. But otherwise, we've done probably $30 million in real estate development, either personally or through nonprofits. And to your previous point, the overwhelming majority of our work has been successful and profitable.
That's great. That's great. A lot of personal time and energy invested, I'm sure. When you say political muscle, I'm just only imagining what that must be like in Jersey. But anyway, thanks for sharing your experiences. Switching gears a little bit, maybe I'd love to hear a little bit more about CCCI, and in particular, you know, we're talking a lot about kind of the partnerships or the relationship here now with us and Kavi. But would love to just hear more about what you've been able to achieve with other corporations and some of the work there.
Yeah, the basic assumption that I make, just having been inside executive boardrooms, having been inside corporate America, the basic assumption I make is that most people who are leading corporations in this country are not evil, wicked people. That white people aren't having meetings on a monthly basis trying to figure out how to keep Black people down. It's more of out of sight, out of mind, and not knowing how to reach people. And so, for instance, 12 years ago, Prudential, which is one of the mega companies in financial services, Prudential did research and discovered that Black Americans, for instance, are open to hearing about financial services in church. Black Americans are underrepresented when it comes to talking to financial professionals. And we know that making individual financial decisions without having access to a comprehensive financial plan can be injurious to your future. And so Prudential called me and said, listen, you seem to be doing the kind of work that our high-level research says Black America needs. How can we help? And so we've had an 11-year relationship with Prudential, and they basically come with us to church. When I go to a church convention to speak, as I will in 2 weeks, they'll send minority financial professionals who will sit down and talk with people who have never talked to a financial planner, never talked to a financial advisor, and talk to them for free. Because these isolated concerns that we have can only be addressed by having a comprehensive strategy for our finances. And Prudential is my major relationship. It's not my only relationship. We work with Smith Barney. We work with Merrill Lynch. We've worked with any number of companies that have a desire to both do good and do well. What Prudential decided at the end of their research is that not only is Black America in need of certain financial resources, but at the end of the day, Black America is available to buy financial products. And often traditional financial professionals always, they saw Black America as being all poor. Well, a third of Black people are poor, a third are middle income, and there are quite a few that are up in their means. And so we spend a lot of time talking with corporate America. We have a partnership with a new fintech called MoneyLion. MoneyLion just went public, merged with a SPAC, and MoneyLion is a way to address the underbanked. 21% of Black Americans have no bank account at all, none. 33% are either banked or unbanked or underbanked. And so the fintech tools give us an opportunity, especially with younger people, to open a bank account, do entry-level investing, have a credit builder program built into the app, and it's all app-based on your phone. You can bank from home. So we have a big relationship with MoneyLion. We're doing a month-long campaign in April, a credit builder campaign, and we do events together, we do education together, and those two partnerships are huge. We also work with smaller organizations. I'm talking with the Minority Bank now in Tennessee, and anything that comes my way or comes the way of our team, where people would like to do something concrete to support the financial economic goals of Black America on the one hand, but on the other hand, do it in a way that makes good business sense. Because see, like our partnership, this is not just a fad to do during Black History Month. This is not social work. If we are successful, Kavi will be successful, because diversity doesn't mean doing something different. What diversity means is doing what you do with some different people. And so we have not set up a special Black fund at Kavi. We've not asked for a Soaries initiative. Kavi is going to continue doing what it does. Prudential does what it does, but by building the connection, the corporate community connection, we find that companies like yours can do exactly what you do with people who otherwise you may have never met and who perhaps would never have met you.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful, and I think so powerful. Just kind of what you've been able to accomplish in some of these relationships, and I just echo that. I mean, this is not charity work or social work. This is really trying to just give our tools to potential real estate investors that might not have uncovered them before, all in service of helping them be successful.
Right.
So I think you said that really well. I know we're kind of coming up on time, but one of the things that we've talked about, Buster, in different conversations is buying back the block. And I'd love maybe to just take it back to kind of real estate to wrap up here. Would love to hear what that means to you, and again, maybe talk a little bit about how you think we can help.
Well, part of our network is a group of young people who have actually coined the phrase, buy back the block. They're in Chicago, they're in Detroit, they're in Boston, they're in Washington, D.C., they're in Compton, California. A young rapper named Nipsey Hussle actually coined the phrase in music. And what it means is that if you go to Baltimore, if you go to Detroit, you'll see entire neighborhoods that are boarded up. You'll see entire communities that are plagued with non-development. And buying back the block means motivating, educating, and then activating entrepreneurs in those neighborhoods, in Baltimore, in Detroit, to literally buy back the block. Many people live in the suburbs and don't visit the inner city often, don't realize that many of our neighborhoods still look like a war just ended. And to the extent that the the socioeconomic status of those neighborhoods can be changed, it requires capital. And it's not going to come from the government only. The government has a role to play. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of money to be made in these neighborhoods. Some of these blocks are tied up with HUD-owned houses and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and private investor pools. And so we want to mobilize the people who live near the block to buy the block and make the block not only socially viable, but economically profitable for the people who are there.
Oh, that's great. That's great, and so powerful. And I think really gets at what we hope this relationship creates, which is people seeing opportunities in their local communities, thinking about it in a way maybe they wouldn't have thought about it before. Working through your programs, establishing a relationship with Kavi, and hopefully, finding success. And so maybe Buster, with that, we'll draw it to a close here. But I guess any final remarks before we do that?
Well, Martin Luther King, when he was leading the civil rights movement, said towards the end of his life, what does it matter if you have the right to eat at the lunch counter and don't have the money to pay for the hamburger? And I think as we shift into this economic focus, what this partnership is doing is helping people who are inclined to do so to use real estate to increase their income and their wealth so that future generations can be the beneficiaries of having closed this wealth gap. I want to thank you for your vision, for your leadership, for your friendship and partnership. And I'm particularly grateful that you, although you had not overcome the flu completely, that you pressed your way to participate while you're still in recovery from the flu. So thank you so much, Michael. And I look forward to working with you. You have one of the best executive corporate teams I have worked with in my life. And I just want to say that publicly. These young people that work with you are the best in the business. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that, and share the same sentiments, Buster. It really is a privilege to have this relationship together. And again, thank you for your friendship over the years, and really excited about what we can hopefully create here together.
So once we exhaust the $220 million goal that I've set, I'll be back.
Sounds good. I look forward to that day.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you.